What I want to talk about today is how my company is using RapidMiner to address the problem of cross-sell, which is a pretty common problem in the commercial environment. As one of the questions was suggesting, I do see a definite dominance of use of these kinds of techniques in commercial applications. And just by quick way of introduction, Modern Marketing Concept, which is the company that I work at, is a company that it's kind of a blend between a marketing agency and a marketing services provider. So we provide services to a number of different clients across multiple industries. Most of our clients are doing business-to-business type commerce. We have a few business-to-consumer as well. But just having that background may help you understand the context of some of the problems that we're trying to solve. But let's start just with a quick overview. These are the topics that I'm going to cover. We'll probably run through some of these a little bit more quickly than others. I think they added another speaker, so I'm going to try to keep this down to just about 30 or 40 minutes. So the first question, what is the business need? What are we trying to do when we're trying to cross-sell? And quite simply, it's about revenue growth. Almost all companies want to grow revenue, no surprise there. And it turns out that one of the best sources of revenue growth are existing customers. And there's a number of reasons for that. Your existing customers already know who you are. They already know what your products are. They're familiar with your name and your brand. They're probably open to receiving further communications from you. And that generally allows you to market to existing customers at a lower marginal cost than other groups who aren't your customers today. And when you can grow your share of revenue with your existing customers, that tends to make them stickier. It increases your share of wallet with them and increases their switching costs. So, how important is this question of cross-sell? A couple of surveys out there. It was one of the top 5 marketers' priorities from an AMA study that was done at the end of last year. And then in terms of lifecycle marketing, it was actually the top by a good margin over either winning back lost customers or acquiring new customers. So this is definitely a question that's on the minds of a lot of companies out there. So what is cross-sell modeling exactly? And let's try to define that so that now when I talk about what it is that we're doing, you'll understand the business problem we're trying to solve specifically. The question of cross-selling arises when you have more than one product that you can sell. If you only have one product, you can't really do an awful lot of cross-selling. But if you have more than one product, and in particular more than one product lines, then how can you market those products in a way that allows you to maximize your revenue growth, but also maximize your customer satisfaction? Because if you don't serve your customers with the products that they need, they're not going to be happy, and then you're not going to be happy. And I want to distinguish, because I think a lot of times there's ambiguity around these terms, cross-sell from some other types of sell. So when I talk about cross-sell, I'm really talking about selling complementary products, which could be products that are used together, or maybe even unrelated products that are used independently. So kind of your classic examples, peanut butter and jelly. Some of you may be familiar with another famous case from retail sales, which was diapers and beer. They did some investigation and understood that there was actually a correlation between the sales of these two products. It's not obvious at first. If you think about it for a while, you might be able to figure it out. But we want to distinguish cross-sell from another type of sales that increases revenue with existing customers, but that's really upsell. And upsell is when you're trying to substitute a product, usually a higher margin product, usually a more expensive product. I mean, a kind of classic case there is, if somebody buys one mark of car and you'd rather them buy your higher brand car. Upsell is a little different. Not that you can't do it with RapidMiner, I'm sure you can, but it's not the problem that my company is generally trying to solve. So very quickly, I just want to talk about a few kind of the traditional approaches to doing cross-sell and why they don't work all that well, or what some of their problems are. So the first one is just, well, why not just use human judgment, basically? You have people, if you're in a sales organization, a direct sales organization, many of our clients have that. They still have field sales people in the business-to-business world. Maybe your customers are like this too. You go out, you actually call on people. So what's the problem with sales?
Well, you ultimately are relying on some individual human's judgment. And that can be hard to replicate. It can be hard to validate that person's judgment based on data. It can be hard to train other people. Everybody can't be as smart as your smartest salesperson. And if you try to routinize it, you can try to implement it in kind of a decision rules type framework, which is very commonly done. It can be difficult to maintain, and the rules can be kind of laborious, and it can be difficult to use the latest and greatest information in that rule set. So not a great approach. What's another approach? Well, you could just take your products and kind of rank order them by overall profitability and then make that your cross-sell recommendation. But the big problem with this is it doesn't really take into consideration the different types of customers that you have. And so people end up getting recommendations that aren't really particularly well suited to their needs as a customer. And ultimately, this is at best irrelevant and potentially alienating, because the customers feel like you're telling them what's important to you, not what's important to them. Okay, third approach, you could just build a custom solution for every cross-sell problem that you come across. And this actually, kind of from a data perspective, this works fine. But it's not a particularly scalable model. And this is the problem, one of the main problems with it that a company like mine has, because we have dozens and dozens of clients that we're trying to support. And if we have to take a data analyst and have them go in and do a lot of custom data analysis for that customer and build their own custom model, and then we get a new client in the door, and we've got to take another data analyst and do the same thing over and over again. We basically have to add new data analysts every time we add new customers, and that's maybe better than the first two solutions that we looked at, but it doesn't really leverage the technology assets and the benefits that we have from doing the types of things that we can now do that we'll talk about in a minute. So it's what we're looking for, what's our desired solution. I think we want to develop a way of doing cross-sell modeling that provides individualized recommendations so that customers feel like they're actually relevant to their needs, that are empirically derived, so it's not just judgmental. You have some quantitative basis for making the recommendation. But that also have these other qualities. It should be data-driven. It should be methodologically sound. It should be scalable. It should also be applicable in a number of different marketing contexts. We'll talk about that as well when we talk about what we're doing at Modern Marketing Concepts. But we use our cross-sell model in outbound marketing. We use it in inbound marketing. We use it in real-time marketing context. We use it in kind of near real-time, what we call near real-time. We use it in batch mode, even though we just heard about the evils of batch processes. So there are a lot of different ways that we can use this type of model. So what is it that we are doing? So now just a very quick overview. Basically, what my company has done is we've used RapidMiner, and we've been using RapidMiner for several years now. We started off just using the RapidMiner Studio version, and then we recently have migrated to using the server version, which allows us to do some pretty neat things that I'll show you here in a couple of minutes. But we've developed an off-the-shelf model that we can use for most accounts. And when I say off-the-shelf, I mean we have a basic model infrastructure that is easily replicated and that can be deployed with minimum customization for the next client in the door. And it's the classic shopping basket methodology. Okay, so everybody's familiar with this methodology. We're going to look at the history of purchases in sales data. We're going to see what item sets are purchased together, and then based on an analysis of the item sets and some other criteria that we throw in there, which we'll talk about what those are, but looking at frequency and support and things like that. Then we're going to look at making a recommendation for what's the next best product to recommend to you given what you're purchasing now, or what you purchased yesterday, or what you purchased over the last month, or whatever time frame you're looking at. The nice thing about this particular approach is also that we've found it's easily adaptable to be used at varying degrees of product specificity. So you can use this on a website when you're dealing with products at an individual SKU level. But you can also roll this up the chain to look at product categories or product families or even product lines. And again, in a business-to-business context where we're doing a lot of our data, this is one of the main things that people are interested in. There might be, tens of thousands of individual SKUs, but they're not always interested in, what's the individual, air filter, if there are 800 of them that, you're buying, and what other air filter you should be buying. The question is, if you're buying air filters as a category, what other product categories should you be buying from that same supplier? All right, so here's just a list of some of the key process operators that we're actually utilizing in our solution. So we use macros heavily. For those of you who haven't yet delved into the world of RapidMiner macros, it's a little bit daunting at first, just because there's some nomenclature that you have to learn. But I can't speak more highly of the use of macros and the ability to use macros to do the kind of rollout that I was just talking about. If you can set all of your key parameters via macros, then you can copy a process over, spend 5 minutes pointing it to the right databases, inputting the right product lines, and then basically letting the thing run on Rails so that you're getting the set of outputs that you need without having to go in and do a bunch of customization for all the ins and outs of your processing. We do read databases because we're pulling all of the data from the transactional sales history. So our clients provide us a data feed or a database connection to their ERP systems, typically, where all their sales transactions are being recorded. We're just reading that data indirectly and then using that to do the analysis that I described. We do all of our data pre-processing. That's obviously not one operator. There's a whole set of operators. But for all the data transformations and such that you need in order to get your models to work properly. The basic model itself is based on the FP growth operator. So again, if that's one that you haven't explored, it's an operator that's used to generate those item sets that I was referencing, where it's looking at taking in a stream of transactional data and asking if you've purchased product A, every time product A is purchased, what other products are purchased in that same transaction. And then after you generate those item sets, then there are specific operators for association rules, which is really all cross-sell is about ultimately. You create your association rules, and there are a whole bunch of different parameters that you can use inside of the RapidMiner process around association rules. Some of them are pretty complicated. I'm not sure I totally understand all of them myself. But the very easy ones to use are pretty obvious. Confidence and lift. The idea of confidence and lift in item sets is basically, how frequently are two item sets purchased together? So that's the confidence. So if you tell me that you purchased product A, how confident am I that people who purchased product A are also purchasing product B versus product C? And then lift is just the idea of, and how prevalent is that combination of transactions above just the independent purchase of product B? So just using some very simple rules based on setting your confidence level and your lift level appropriately, you can come up with a set of recommendation rules and then use those rules to apply to a new stream of transactions, whether they're, again, real-time or batch transactions. We do some other stuff to modify the final cross-sell score because we have some other business rules. These are a little bit sometimes a part of the process where there's some customization that comes in. So sometimes companies have rules about when they want to recommend certain products and when they might not want to recommend certain products, so you can set some exclusions. We also can incorporate things like, well, do people have to fall below a certain threshold of purchases in a particular category before you're willing to recommend it? Or do you want to make a rule that you're only going to recommend a product that they have never purchased before? Things like that. So there's a way to take the rules that are coming out and then use generate attributes to customize that. And then finally, after we calculate our cross-sell recommendations, then we write them back out to the databases that all the other systems are going to use in order to utilize that cross-sell recommendation. So here's just an obligatory RapidMiner screenshot. Yeah, Bernie, do you have a question? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, quick question. Do you then follow up to see whether the client actually did purchase? So when you write it out in the table, then is there follow-up afterwards to see whether or not it worked?
Yeah, in a number of different ways, actually. I mean, the models are continuously learning. So as people are changing their purchase behavior, then that whatever is in the sales stream is being incorporated into the model's recommendations, and that's affecting future cross-sell recommendations. So there's one way that it comes out. And then secondly, and even more specifically, we're often running campaigns and then we're testing cross-sell recommendations from this model versus whatever business as usual strategy might be for that particular company. And so we can measure the difference in sales that using a model like this can generate. So actually, and this is, I think you can see there, these are actually just all sub-process operators. So I mean, the actual cross-sell model is probably at close to 100 different operators. But this is all happening in RapidMiner server. So how are we implementing it? Basically, as I've just been explaining, for each client that we have, we're reading in the sales data, we're running the model. We're actually doing it on dozens of clients across many different industries. A lot of our clients are in the healthcare industry, selling medical supplies or medical devices. We work with pharmaceutical companies. We work in the building products and construction space, working with manufacturers of all sorts of different building products, from plumbing supplies to electrical supplies to roofing, heating and air conditioning. Everything that I've talked about so far is done within RapidMiner or RapidMiner server. And these jobs can take anywhere from a couple of seconds to run to upwards of an hour when we're running like a month's worth of sales data at a time for a very large client where we've got millions of item sets. All the scores are calculated in RapidMiner and then published to database tables. And then other applications, our marketing applications, typically retrieve that information from the database table and then show the correct recommendations for each customer, or select customers based on their recommendations. We also, and I'll show a couple of screenshots of this in a minute, we also display our cross-sell recommendation information in dashboards that we've built within RapidMiner server, which is something that it's really great because it allows our marketing staff, either our internal marketing staff or the marketing staff at our clients, to understand, to explore what the cross-sell recommendations are and try to get a better understanding of what the recommendations are and why they're being recommended. So, why is this better? Basically, as I was saying before, for a company like ours that is doing this for dozens of different clients, scalability is key. I have a very small staff considering the number of clients that I'm supporting. So we've got a team of half a dozen, and I would need probably 4 times that many analysts if we were doing all of this custom, each and every client getting their own unique cross-sell model. It's also something that very limited involvement is needed really to get this model implemented. As long as we get our hands on a sales data feed and get some very basic business rules from the client, then they don't have to spend a lot of time doing it, and we don't have to spend a lot of time doing it for them. As I already mentioned, the model is being continuously updated. So as sales data changes and purchase patterns change, then the model's recommendations are going to adapt and change as a consequence. And this is actually something that we've started doing recently even more. Some of our products, particularly in the building products, some of our clients' products, particularly in building products, are very seasonal in purchase behavior. And we were trying to figure out how we could use the model to adjust for this seasonality in the purchase behavior. And it turns out it's pretty easy to do just by windowing the time that you're looking at for your recommendations. So if it's now August and I want to make recommendations, instead of looking back over the last 3 months or 6 months, I can go back to last year and look at what people were purchasing in August, September, and October, and then use that data to make the recommendation for today. So it's pretty easy to do that, and that's something that, again, with the macro, we've now parameterized, so we can just tell it basically what month we want to look at for the model. So just a couple of use cases and examples. So how can it be used? We already talked about the different levels that we run this model at. So when we run the model at the aggregate level product, so this is something above the level of an individual SKU, basically a product category or product family, then we can do something like this. A client says, okay, I've got excess inventory of a particular product family, and I'm going to be running a promotion. Who are the customers that are best, who are most responsive to this particular promotion? We can go and we can select those customers using the cross-sell score. We can identify the top cross-sell score for each customer and then store that information on the record so that they can be referenced for live interactions. So we have, as I said, a lot of our clients still have salespeople, and they're going out and calling on their customers in the field. And they're going to pull that information up in their SFA. Maybe they're using Salesforce, and our database is feeding Salesforce, and it's telling them, okay, when you visit client John Doe, then you need to talk with that client about these 3 products. We can leverage the cross-sell recommendations to populate direct marketing. We were talking before about direct marketing. So we do a lot of that, a lot of direct mail, still old school, email, telesales script, and website-based promotions. You'll see a couple of screenshots of that in a minute. What about at the more granular level? So at the actual product level, we use these models to make recommendations inside shopping carts. I mean, you all have seen this if you go to Amazon, right? You stick something in your shopping cart, and as soon as you do that, you get these banners at the bottom that say, people who bought that, you should look at this, that, and the other thing. Well, we're doing the same thing. It's just with, building products and healthcare supplies instead of books or consumer packaged goods. There's some other things, though, that we do that you might not immediately think of this. Phone orders. So there are still a lot of companies out there, believe it or not, that process sales over the phone. And when that person's on the phone and then they say, oh, I need to purchase X, Y, and Z, prompts up right on the screen for that telerep, okay, hey, Mr. Client, have you considered purchasing this other product as well? And then we're also using these, what I was referencing before is these near real-time applications. So in many of the cases, our clients aren't doing sales that we could affect in a real-time manner. We're getting a batch sales feed. We might get it a day later or a week later. But we can still look at that and see, okay, this client purchased a particular product yesterday. We can send them an email today that, hey, you bought this product. Do you know that these other 3 products go along well with that product? Or you can do the same thing with an outbound call script. Or you can do the same thing on a website if they identify themselves when they log back in. So these are all things that we're doing for our clients using the cross-sell score that I've been describing. So here's just a few screenshots. Actually, this is the stuff. This comes straight off of a company's an actual dashboard, and as I said, we have this running so that these dashboards all get populated by the underlying processes, and this is all put up in a dashboard that is then accessible to the client or to our own internal staff, all running off of RapidMiner server. So they can go in, they can see the distribution of what the primary cross-sell recommendation is by the different product lines. They can see the average annual sales for each of those different product lines. They can see how a particular top recommendations distribute across the different products, whether they're in first position, second position, or third position. They can see what the total number of recommendations is for any particular product line. So this is helpful because we tend to get, if any of you actually work with clients other than your own company, even within your own company, if you work with any non-technical people, they always question what comes out of a model when you're trying to propose using a model like this to replace one of those other methods that we talked about at the beginning, which is undoubtedly how they were doing cross-sell before you came along. And so you need to be able to explain to them, well, where do these recommendations come from? How do these recommendations look? How do they compare to whatever your business as usual strategy was beforehand? So we found that these dashboards are really helpful because they let people get in, they can play around, they can understand why, they can see the whole distribution of the different cross-sell recommendations. We had then actually added to the dashboards, because people loved it so much, the ability to go in and drill down and filter out and get a table where they can look up, they can select whether they're looking for a particular product line's recommendation and they want to see the different range of cross-sell scores, or they want to be able to say whether or not if you purchased this particular product before, yes or no, what the recommendation is going to be. So again, this is all done via RapidMiner server in the dashboards, where you can just go in and give this functionality right to your end user, running off of the underlying database.
And we can show them these types of summary tables. And then actually we can even give them the ability to just download the whole thing. If they want to just download the database and look at it, pull it into Excel. We were joking before about Excel, but you'd be surprised, how much business work is still done in Excel. And so if you can give people something that they're comfortable with, then you can really help them get over those adoption hurdles. Yes, sir.
So this is the results of the analysis, right, and the recommendations.
Correct.
Have you had enough time with clients to follow these results through to close of sales?
Oh yeah, definitely. So, we're seeing tremendous success. It's quite a wide range of increases in sales in percentage terms, but for a large going back, because some here we go, right? So this is average annual sales. So you can see some products, there's very high dollar amounts, and so even small changes, if you can improve sales by just a few percent, that makes a big difference. For a smaller product line that maybe was getting ignored, using one of the other approaches because it wasn't one of the top products, it wasn't a product that all the salespeople were familiar with, we've seen literally hundreds and thousands of percent increases in sales in some of these other product lines for our clients. And as I mentioned before, we're typically running, when we're working with a new client and we're introducing this framework, we're typically running cross-sell campaigns with using these recommendations in parallel with whatever they were doing before, so that they can assess what the impact is. And we've had a lot of success with this. So again, just some indications here. So what happens? These are some website examples. I think I've got a. Here we go. Yeah, so like these products that show up here, these are going to change, based on when you log in and we identify who you are. That's going to be driven from the cross-sell recommendation. Or this is a similar thing for a healthcare client. What you see here and here on a desktop, or what you see here for a mobile phone, is driven by whatever the latest recommendation is for you. So, again, just to reemphasize, what does this mean for our clients? What are we doing? We're deploying these automated follow-ups that I talked about. We are tailoring the outbound offers to the customers, and also the products, if we're doing product-specific promotions, seasonal promotions, or what have you. We can apply these same models on clients' field sales managed organizations, and then push that information out to them for recommendations. And we can support the real-time marketing displays, like I was just showing you on the prior page, based on our knowledge of who that customer is. So I am going to skip over these slides on who MMC is, just to give a couple more minutes for questions, and not to crowd out the other speakers as well. So this is just a quick explanation of who MMC is and what we do. So. Yes?
From the consumer perspective, I sometimes get cross-sold, and it seems inappropriate. And just a quick example to illustrate my question, I had to call my broadband provider last month, and I don't have home phone service or TV service from them. And I had a problem with my broadband service, so I called them to find out why I had the problem, what they were going to do to fix it. And it was very evident that the nice lady on the other side of the phone had to try to cross-sell me as part of her job, or she would probably get in trouble with her supervisor or whoever. But that was not what I wanted as a consumer, and frankly escalated the problem that I was having, because I wanted the problem that I called about fixed. Have you used data mining to try and inform when it's appropriate to try and cross-sell versus maybe when it's appropriate to choose not to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We haven't done a lot of that work, to be honest. I think it's probably more prevalent of an issue in the consumer world, which, as I mentioned, is not the vast majority of our work is actually in the business-to-business world, and it does involve kind of more human interaction than you might expect in the B2C world. But it's still a good question, and thinking about how to determine, right, what's a good opportunity to cross-sell versus what's a good opportunity not to cross-sell. For some of the context that we talk about,
in our case, they're very much triggered around sales and when people have bought something. So building products, if people buy a particular piece of equipment and the manufacturer knows that that equipment uses things like filters or adapters or other things like that, that's often where we're getting into the kind of cross-selling that we're doing. But it's a really good question. There you go.
Do you take the success into account, for example, if you defect the system to teams and parameters, if the cross-sell attempt was successful or not?
Yeah, well, yes, in a couple of different ways. Again, I think the most fundamental feedback loop for it is whether or not the sales pattern changes over time. So if people are buying and they start to buy those things in combination, then that's going to reinforce that recommendation. If people don't make that set of purchase recommendations, then it's not going to, and so that recommendation is going to be diminished. But as I said, we also kind of separately from that, we do run targeted campaigns, and one of the nice things about direct marketing is pretty much everything is measurable. And so we can segment the audience, and this is something we very often do. And then we can try to determine, okay, cross-sell model is working really well with this segment. It's not working so well with this other segment. We're going to continue to use the model, kind of off the shelf as it is for, whatever the first segment is, but then go in and make some adjustments to the other segments to see if we can improve the performance. So that's definitely something that we're doing. Yes, sir.
I have no experience also with a quick question. So when you do the cross-selling, how do you control for the competition within what you cross-sell?
So that's an interesting question, and it is definitely something that we have to deal with. It's usually done with a set of business rules. I alluded to earlier the fact that when we originally generate the association rules, then we often modify those association rules based on business logic. And the business logic that we would layer in order to make the recommendation or finalize the recommendation often will incorporate issues related to cannibalization or relative margin of products, or if there's market share goals that a particular product has. So that kind of stuff isn't necessarily directly observable from the sales data itself in terms of the item set combinations, but it is information that can be incorporated into the cross-sell model.